only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to the 612 Vikings podcast. I am your host, Dustin, alongside Drew, my co-host. And then today we got a special guest on here. Today we have Tyler Fornes, aka Forno. Tyler, how are we doing today, man?
I'm good, guys. Today was State Fair Day, and we're riding high and hurting all at the same time. But that's the joy of the fair.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, I'm going to try to go tomorrow, maybe tomorrow night, get some rides, some food. I heard the food's really good. I know we were talking off air about this too, but I didn't think I asked you this. Did you get the deep fried, what was it, ranch that they have?
Okay, so we tried it, and it's not what you think. Okay. It's not where it's just like liquid ranch oozing out. It's kind of like a cream cheese wonton, but ranch based. So it's got it's a little heavier. It's breaded. So it's not like a wonton wrapper. It's a triangle, but the filling is like a wonton. So as long as you kind of like that element where it's like, hey, I want a wonton that's ranch flavored, I think you're going to enjoy it. So I think when it initially was talked about, everybody thought, why are you just going to eat ranch? Well, now we have an answer. You're not just going to eat liquid ranch, which, look, Minnesotans will absolutely do that. Like, don't put it past us. We will eat ranch.
100%.
This is an Americanized version of like a wonton filling in a triangle of breading.
Okay. Follow-up question to that before we get into our meaty football stuff. I heard rumors that you could dip it also in ranch. Is that true?
I don't know for sure. My brother's friend got hot honey with it. I don't know. I didn't order it, so I can't give you the full 401. But if you want it, it's at Lulu's Public House in the old Heritage Square. So where the rides are, go north like half a block. Pretty easy.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. And for everybody else too, everybody has to try the deep fried ranch and, just try something else for once. So yeah, I guess from that, we'll kind of get into our meaty football stuff. And we'll kind of recap the Las Vegas Raiders and the Cleveland Browns game. As some of you guys know, me and Drew were at the Browns preseason game. What a trip that was. Very long drive back. I hated that part, but other than that, we got the win in Cleveland. I was there for the Raiders preseason game as well. We got a win there as well. We're 2-0. So yeah, what did you guys both like in both of those preseason games? I'll start with Drew with this one.
I'll start off with this though, but no one tells you about how boring it is of a state Ohio is to drive through, because there literally is just nothing out there. It's just nothing. Like there's really nothing to do there. So I always just I slept on the way back. I probably slept for like 2 hours in Dustin's car in the passenger seat. So but what I like though, if the environment of the Browns game though was definitely something I really liked. I was actually really shocked to see like how well built that stadium was, considering I think we found out it was built in 1999. So, it's a really stadium that's kept up pretty well. But going to the Vikings, the thing that I was like really surprised about coming away with that was just like how well built we are depth wise on defense, because it seems like in the past it just seems like all these guys or teams or whatever would just go in just obliterate us from the past preseason teams. So it's kind of a nice problem to have going into week 3 is it's not like, oh, well, this guy has to be on the 53-man roster. It's kind of nice to have that problem. It's like, well, now it's debating who should even make it to begin with. So it's kind of a problem that, we aren't really used to having, especially defensively. Mm-hmm. So I kind of came away very pleased with how he played, especially, DTR, he's a guy that's played starting reps from last year. He did get hurt and then it ended up being the Joe Flacco show, kind of similar to Case Keenum's ride a couple of years ago. But I was really surprised with how well we've been playing defensively, and I was really happy to see that carry over from that Raiders game into the Cleveland game for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Tyler, what about you? What did you like from, I guess, both of those games or one of those games?
there's a lot of things that I really liked. I think it really starts with the defensive line play. I thought we saw a lot of really interesting and positive steps for some of these young players. Jalen Redmond, he's not going to stuff the stat sheet, but he's doing a lot of the dirty, grimy work to help a lot of those other guys be able to spring and make plays. Guys like Bo Richter and Levi Drake Rodriguez. Redmond was the guy crashing on some of those stunts to be able to let those guys do their work. And then Levi Drake Rodriguez, the motor, and you saw it on his Texas A&M Commerce film. What was weird about that is his best film was ironically against his best competition. He only played, I believe, one FBS team because he played in the Southland Conference in the FCS. It was his best tape. I think it was Old Dominion. Wow. Now, Old Dominion isn't exactly a good football team, but there's still FBS competition. So in his one game against a group of 5 school, played very well. And I think when he came in, it sounded to me like they were going to move him to nose. And he's bulked up quite a bit. I think he went from 285 pre-draft to around like 310. But you don't look at him and see bad weight. I don't think it's as good of weight as you necessarily would prefer a guy at 310 to be. But you're going from FCS, which is basically some of these schools, you're going into a high school. You go to like Plano East, Duncanville, like in these schools in Texas that are like 6A, they got better facilities than the FCS schools, like significantly better. And if you have that, well, it's great for a strength and conditioning program, but if you don't have the facilities, it can be difficult. So now Levi Drake Rodriguez is in the Vikings building. They've got him on a plan. He's got access to the right food. And by doing so, you're helping him gain weight properly instead of, hey, I'm just going to go eat 3 Chipotle burritos, which Chipotle burritos aren't bad for you. But, maybe in the Vikings kitchen, they can figure out a recipe just a little bit better to accentuate those goals. But he's played extremely well. And I've been impressed with Bo Richter, but he's also gotten blown up a couple times. One series of plays against the Browns that I found very impressive, he got blown up on a bootleg. He just almost forgot that the Browns ran bootlegs. The very next play, he contained the bootleg and got a sack. So you saw in real time, learning from your mistakes and fixing it on the fly. That kind of stuff is going to just wow coaches' pants off because you have the athleticism, which Richter obviously does. There's ability there. Now you're showing, hey, I can learn. Everybody can learn when you're in the NFL, but if you show it like that, it's going to open eyes, and that's going to be able to help you potentially get a roster spot or spot on the practice squad. I also have to shout out Jaron Hall, who looked like crap against the Raiders up until that final drive. And the final drive was fine, but he needed that in order to not have a catastrophe of a performance. And then goes out against the Browns, 4 or 5, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, perfect passer rating. It's very good for my agenda because I think I might be Jaron Hall's biggest supporter that's not Mormon or family. So, that was really good to see. Overall, just there's been a lot of good from this Vikings team. I know it's preseason, and I know a lot of these guys won't be here long term, but I feel a lot better about the back end of the roster now than I did 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah, especially that defensive line, as you were talking about. I feel like that might be our stronger depth pieces on that defense, at least, because our corners, we all know our corner situation. We just signed Stephon Gilmore, and like a couple days ago, free agency. And then, you have some other guys there too, but they've all been hurt or, just inexperienced or whatever they are. So it's really nice to see that depth on that defensive line, something that we've been kind of looking for the past couple of years too, because outside of Danielle Hunter, we've had like Patrick Jones, we've had DJ Wanham, which filled in nice. But other than that, we really had like nobody for edge rushers. And the interior line too, Harrison Phillips, and then whoever else, we need somebody to step up, and hopefully Jaquelin Roy can step up this year too. I know he's looked really good in camp, but other than that, I think our depth looks really good for that defensive line. So staying on the topic of defense too, Lewis Seen had a really good preseason game against the Cleveland Browns. Probably the best game he's ever had, whether that's regular season or preseason. And he had a sack, he had a big hit too in preseason, which a lot of fans liked. Not so much Cleveland Browns fans, but I guess my question will translate to, with that performance on what was it, Saturday against the Browns, does that help his case of staying on the roster, or does that help his trade value for the future? Maybe before week 1 or whenever it is. Tyler, I'll start with you on that one.
I'd say both.
Okay.
And it's so hard from an outside perspective to truly know what's been going on with Lewis Cine, especially health-wise. If any of the three of us suffer that injury, it could be catastrophic to our lives. It could impact us. I have a friend who's in media who, ironically, you remember the Fire Mike Norvell spaces when Florida State lost Travis Hunter to Jackson State? You remember hearing about those? He was listening to those, and he broke his leg by tripping on the sidewalk, and like compound fracture, that kind of bad. He's still having issues with it to this day, and he's just a normal guy. Lewis Cine had that in a game and then came back to play NFL football, and I don't think we understand how truly remarkable and impressive that is. I also wonder how much that really impacted him last year. Now, I know there's been talk coming from the building, like through media sources, that say he's just not getting it, that he just doesn't have like the mental side down. I've never talked to the man. I don't know what kind of the mental stuff is, but I can tell you there's a real chance that he just wasn't able to be the same guy, explosive, being able to make all the things and trust that his body can do it. Guys who tear their ACLs, a lot of it's mental. They don't want to put that kind of torque on their knee because they're worried it's just going to snap like it already did. And that kind of hesitation can be a real factor mentally, even though your body can handle it. So how much of that is impacting the fact that he's not quite developing as fast? He also could just really stink and not be a good NFL football player. There's just so many variable factors where I'm keeping my mind open, and I'm not going to say, hey, he's an utter catastrophe. What a terrible pick. I want to see more. I want to see him put some stuff together. I also didn't think his game was overly good. I thought he got himself out of position way too often. The hit was awesome, and you like those highlight kind of plays. But it's less about the highlight plays and more about, hey, what are you doing on a down-to-down basis? Can I trust you? Because the idea was that Cine was in the Josh Metellus role. When like that would be his perfect role. He's got the speed, he's got the athleticism, he's got the oomph. And that's kind of what he did at Georgia to an extent. So the fact that Josh Metellus is in that role, one, speaks to Metellus's intelligence, because he's nowhere near the athlete that Lewis Cine is. He's an NFL caliber athlete, but there's a difference between a guy like Metellus and a guy like Cine for your athleticism. And that's not an insult. That's just kind of just reality. There are some guys who just stand out above everybody else athletically. Will Cine be able to take a step forward? I don't know. But I feel a lot more confident that you can get something out of this guy over the next 2 years than I did 2-3 weeks ago. 2-3 weeks ago, I didn't have him on my 53-man roster projections. I was just kind of like, yeah, I think he's cooked. I think he's done. And he just needs a fresh start. Maybe now there's something. I don't know. I'll leave that up to the guys in the building that know more about him and know more about that injury.
Yeah, and we won't know until I guess we know. That's just how it will go, and we'll see how that goes. Drew, what are you thinking? You think that you kind of have the same idea? Is he more likely to make the roster, or is it more for a trade? What are you thinking?
So when it came to Lewis Cine, like Tyler brought this up earlier, was he had the compound fracture going back to London, and being overseas like that, we knew that he was a family man. He has a daughter, he has a kid. You're in another country by yourself. I mean, you have a trainer with you, obviously, because they're not just going to leave you alone. But being away from family from that long, especially a guy that has a daughter like that, who's basically his whole world. And we knew that as soon as he came in when he was drafted, because it was on those little draft videos that we get when he's visiting the facility. I think being away from family, that takes a mental toll on you like that too. So and Tyler was saying earlier, you're not, maybe you're just not the same athletically. I think it's like a case where it's almost like the yips. Every time I think about the yips, I think of John Lester throwing to first base. If you're a baseball fan out there, like mid 2010s, if it could have just been something like that. It's just the headspace wasn't there. And then you also, on top of that, you're changing your coordinator too. So Donatel is very conservative, where you have the more Flores, it's more of an aggressive scheme. So just going from a rookie, which was drafted to be the Donatel guy, shifting to a Flores scheme, which was, it's a totally different system, going from a rookie system to sophomore system. And we've seen it happen all the time in the NFC North. We look at Mitch, we look at Justin Fields and the Bears, just changing schemes and how catastrophic that was to their careers. And, now they're, then they both just go to Pittsburgh afterwards. It seems to be the storyline for those guys. But, and I think, kind of for Lewis Cine going into this week, or this preseason, I should say, I think the leg up for him is, since he was that first round pick, the cap is in his favor, where, if they do a post June 1, or, however the cut works for him, if they can't find a trade partner, and let's just say it is post June 1, that money still transitions over to 2025. Or if it's just pre June 1st, they just up and cut them, where it's, you're still losing money going into this year. So if it is a thing where it's between, say a Jay Ward to a Lewis Cine, and you have them at the exact same tier, they're going to go with Lewis Cine. So it's almost like they have to have it be where Lewis Cine is just that bad. And it's good to see now that he's showing that potential now. And, the only way out of this Lewis Cine thing is via trade. That's the only way. So I've seen I think we've all seen some rumors out there that the reason why he was playing is to get some more tape on him to make him a trade asset, which could obviously still happen. But, it's kind of like a wait and see mode right now, and we'll see how he does against Philly. And I think if he doubles down again with the game he had against Cleveland, I think he's got to make the roster. This is your first pick. I thought this guy was supposed to be the guy to replace Harrison Smith, when he eventually retired. So, I kind of want to see how he does against Philly before I say keep him or cut him. But if I had to pick right now, I'd probably say lean towards keeping him right now, just because of that cap number alone. But we'll just kind of in a wait and see mode. Hopefully this is the breakout game we've all been looking for from Cine. So
sure, yeah, I think the Vikings will probably ultimately keep a guy like Lewis Cine. Just that former first rounder. He can be good on special teams. I don't think he got really too much special team run last year, but that's just coming off of that leg injury of the year prior. So I don't know, maybe the Vikings do keep him around for like a special teams role. Obviously they didn't see that in someone like Andrew Booth that got traded to the Cowboys, but that's neither here or there. But Lewis Cine, I ultimately think that he'll probably stay on the roster too. I don't know if they'll trade, a former first round pick just like that. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he will get, a little something mid to late pick. So, we'll see what kind of happens with that. So, kind of after recapping the Raiders and Browns game, we'll kind of move on and preview the Philadelphia Eagles. I heard that Jaron Hall is going to be our QB1 for that game, and then Matt Corral is going to be QB2, and they're just kind of split, I guess, through that. So what do you guys want to see, I guess, from this Vikings team in this last game? Whether that's depth, whether that's, whatever you guys think will be, I guess, prominent to see. Tyler, we'll start with you.
I just want to point out that is Minnesota Vikings starting quarterback Jaron Hall right there.
True.
I am telling you nothing but the truth. I think Hall
perfect passer rating.
He needs to have a really good game in order to make the roster. And the reason why is because of the new rule. So a couple years ago, they instituted the rule that you can have your third QB dress and not take up in one of the 45 roster spots. That was huge because it allowed teams to dress 46 players and they didn't have to worry about that third quarterback. Very rarely do you see the third quarterback come in, but if you need him, you need him. And that stemmed from the 49ers against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. Brock Purdy went down, and then Josh Johnson went down, and they were basically running a wildcat offense in the NFC Championship game. You can't be doing that. So
crazy.
you had to be on the active roster last year. This year, you can be on the practice squad. If Jaren Hall plays extremely well, he likely remains on the active roster because the Vikings may not feel comfortable trying to move him to waivers. If he doesn't, I think they'll feel a lot more comfortable. So if Jaren Hall wants to make an extra $500,000-$600,000 this year, he needs to play well so he stays on that active roster and does not get sent down. I think that's one of the bigger storylines. Jay Ward, I think, needs to ball out or he's gone. He was a catastrophe against the Browns. I thought it was a great idea to move him to corner and give him opportunities, give him snaps. It ain't working. So you got to pivot. You got to put him back to safety. And because of that, now you're in a position where Ward is playing bad football because you put him in a different spot, but he was thought of relatively well for you as a safety. Do they just not believe he can be a safety? Are they going to be willing to move him back? Plus, his tackling was abysmal. You cannot tackle that poorly in this defense. It's too aggressive. Aggressive defenses need great tacklers. Conservative defenses don't, because you're going to be able to do the gang tackle method. Aggressive ones, if you miss a tackle, that can be like 20, 30, 40 yards extra for the offense. And that's just awful. I think those guys need to really have a good game. And Dalton Risner needs to hope that his contemporaries stink, because I don't think right now he makes the roster. I don't. From my understanding, he has roster making incentives in his contract. That's kind of what I've been hearing from multiple people. So if he's got those in his contract and he doesn't play all preseason, why would you keep him? And plus, I don't think he's that good. I know a lot of the fan base does, and they think he's really good and he's better than Ed Ingram. He's not, and I don't believe the tape bears that out. And I've been very, very critical of that point. But if his contemporaries stink, like Juergens was a catastrophe against the Browns. Juergens has another catastrophic performance. Risner might make the team, but he's going to need guys to really stink in front of him. Otherwise, the Vikings may just cut ties with both of those guys and decide, hey, we'll hit waivers. We'll stick with 8, and then we'll see what the waiver wire does, and we'll go from there.
Well, they just signed, I think, 1 or 2 offensive linemen, 2 interior guys as well. So
those are
maybe that's
the preseason game. I don't think those are anything noteworthy other than that. Cindric was on the team. He was actually cut for Dalton Risner. And Chuck Falaga, he played at Michigan, and then he spent a year with the Golden Gophers. He's a camp body. He is just, we need guys to play, and that's what Mo Ibrahim is too. Hopefully they can be more than that, but that's where we're at.
Okay. Drew, what would you kind of like want to see from this Vikings team in this Philly game? Or I guess who has the most to prove, I guess, or the way you want to phrase that?
I think I brought this up to you when we were at the Cleveland game, but Brian Asamoah has been kind of he's been so shaky where he'll have a good play and then he'll just come down and he'll just miss it, like a really easy tackle, and it's like a 20-yard gain after that. So his inconsistency is starting to scare me. He is in year 3, so granted, I mean, some people are going to nickel and dime. I know some people are kind of upset about the Stephon Gilmore void year, and it's only $2 million. But if we're going to do that, Brian Asamoah, I think, is a guy that needs to ball out, because I think Dallas Gant, I've been kind of impressed with him a little bit. Especially a guy that's a UDFA who's going to be significantly cheaper coming up from that. I think he's going to have to play a really good game. I know another guy I'm kind of looking at was Duke Shelley. I saw something earlier today that I think it was what's his name? Darren Wolfson was saying that Duke Shelley is not on track to make the 53-man roster. Yeah. And with guys like a Caleb Evans, what we'll see about him. I mean, he really hasn't been a world beater at all either. So, with the signing of Stephon Gilmore, I mean, he's going to have a really good game, and I know he's a big fan favorite, but it's really not tracking well that he's going to make this roster. I mean, I'm just looking at the depth chart now. I mean, Fabian Moreau's been playing a lot better than him too. So, we'll just have to see with Duke Shelley. I think his return to Minnesota is going to be short-lived, unfortunately.
I'll say this. I think a Caleb Evans is a lock to make the roster, and I don't think it's close. He's been fine. Duke Shelley stinks. This preseason performance has not been good. He's been with the fourth team almost exclusively. Mm-hmm. To me, like, we'll always remember the PBU in the game, and we'll always remember that I think he was PFF's third ranked quarterback in coverage in 2022. But some of those coverage grades with how the Vikings were playing defense, I think, were a little skewed. But cool guy, glad he got another chance. It ain't happening.
Yeah. And kind of like, sorry, Drew. I think he was kind of quote unquote made for that at Donatel defense, kind of like how Lewis seen Andrew Booth, that 2022 defensive draft class was. I think he played a lot better in like a quote unquote prevent defense or conservative defense that isn't as aggressive as Brian Flores, and I think it's just like a quick turnaround for Duke Shelley, and that's just not the system that he really flourishes in. So, yeah, unfortunately, I think that the Vikings are probably going to have to cut ties with a guy like Duke Shelley that a lot of fans do like.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of looking at another guy I think might have to show out too is Andre Carter. With the way the edge room's playing too, it's so deep. That's a guy I'm kind of watching for. He was a guy at Army. I think he hit the double-digit sack mark, I think his sophomore year or junior season there. Kind of took a decline in the sack total numbers that following season, but he was still a guy that was on the NFL radar. Usually when you hit double-digit sacks, you'll hit the NFL radar. But with how well the edge room's been playing, is there any room for Andre Carter to even have a shot at a 53? I mean, I think it's a lock to make the practice squad, but you're also risking a former top, 1 or 2 UDFA guy from the 2023 class hitting waivers and making the practice squad. So is that something like I'm kind of wondering is if he does get released, is he a guy that could get snagged on the waiver wire because of the name alone?
Personally, I think he probably does make the roster only because last year he did. Now that's not, telling of what he'll do this year, but I think that he'll probably make the roster this year just because of depth. And I think he's gotten a little bigger too from last year, a little bit more bulkier. And just through training camp, I thought he looked pretty decent as well. Not super flashy by any means, but I think he probably took a, whether that's a half step or a full step, whatever it is, I think he took some sort of step up from last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, with the preview of Philly in the books and then the recap of the Raiders and Browns, I have a couple other questions for both of you, and then we'll kind of sign off from there. So, first one, what we'll start with Tyler on this one. Do we have any surprise cuts outside of Dalton Reisner, as you mentioned before? Someone that you don't think that will make the roster that, some fans might think, or however you want to phrase this question as well.
It's an interesting one. Jay Ward is probably the one that really sticks out to me. I have a premonition that Pat Jones gets traded because he's a very solid edge 4. You could probably get a 6th or 7th round pick for him, or you do that kind of pick swap. But he is just fine, and I don't think he's got a future with the Vikings after this year. Jihad Ward has really shown that he can kind of fill that role and do some more stuff on the inside, which is huge with how this defense really prioritizes versatility. So I think he could be a guy that's traded. Jay Ward is probably the one that I keep going to that's a surprise cut because he was a 4th round pick last year, and he's kind of been playing out of position per se, even though he had over 100 snaps at outside corner during his senior year at LSU. Another one, I know you guys mentioned Andre Carter making the team. I personally don't think he does because I don't think he's shown enough growth year over year. And they've had some really impressive edge performances from Richter and Owen Porter. And plus, you have Gabriel Murphy, who really flashed during training camp, but just hasn't been able to stay healthy enough to play in the games, which I think is going to cost him a roster spot. So there really is, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of surprises. I thought all offseason Kenny Nwangwu was gone. And he came in and started to look like a real running back, not just a return guy who plays running back, a running back that's also a good return guy, which is a great development for the Vikings.
100%. Yeah, that's going to be a huge step up. We even saw it in the Raiders game. That long, I think it was like a 40-some yard touchdown. So that was pretty nice of Nwangu. So yeah, Drew, what any surprise roster cuts from you?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of on the same thing. So I don't have any like big disagreement, unfortunately. But
Sure.
I think a lot of these guys are just kind of expected guys. I guess if I had to pick one guy, I guess Jaquelin Roy maybe could be a guy. Taki Taimani's been lighting up the PFF boards. I think he's been I think he was the number one guy in the Browns game. Maybe there's a spot for him if they want to go with somebody that's younger. I could maybe see that. Jaquelin Roy's kind of I know he's been having a good camp. I just, PFF wise, it hasn't been the guy that's been like in the 80s or the 90s like Tamani has been, but I don't know if there's really like a guy that's like, yeah, like this could be a shocker. I think Dalton Risner is probably the big one. Jay Ward could be a guy if they think Lewis Seen is going to make the roster. Maybe, I don't know if this would be like a surprising one, but just more one that would be like an unfortunate one, because I could say Nashawn Wright, because you basically got him for Andrew Booth and then you spent a second round pick on him. I think that might just be one that, it would just be admitting a disaster of a pick, which is unfortunate because I felt like Andrew Booth had the raw talent to do it. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was ACL tear or, I know he had some injury. I think he had some injury things at Clemson as well. Maybe it's just the injury bugs just kind of caught up to him, but I don't think there's anyone like that we're going to be floored that is going to get cut. And if it would be, it'd be somebody that they'll probably snag back onto the practice squad, I would say.
Sure. Awesome. Well, last question for you guys. I know we really haven't talked too much about the offense that much, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think talking about the defense is definitely a good talking point because of, they took a big step up from the year prior. From 2022 with Brian Flores taking over and all that, and obviously a big step up as a whole this year as well. So wide receiver, Jalen Naylor, is he everybody's consensus wide receiver 3, or is that Brandon Powell? Or do you think that it could be like a wide receiver by committee type deal where they're both a wide receiver 3? How do we view that? We'll start with Drew on this one.
I would say he's the wide receiver 3. I think he's been getting a lot more looks. I think he's trying to get back into game shape a little bit more. He's been kind of battling injuries left and right, and just the hype around. He's had a better camp. He's had the better preseason than Brandon Powell. I don't see why you can't, or why you shouldn't put Jalen Naylor as number 3. I think he does something that's different from Jefferson and Addison too, is that he's that speed guy that can stretch the field vertically, which I feel like is something we've been really, really lacking in the last 5-6 years. I mean, the last time I could really think of a guy that could stretch the field vertically was maybe Aldrick Robinson, back in like the first year of Kirk Cousins. Just a guy that could just take the top off on just pure speed alone. I don't think Brandon Powell really is that guy. He's like a 4.4 speed probably, but I would say Jalen Naylor has to be the wide receiver 3. He just brings something different to this Vikings offense that we just haven't really seen in quite some time. But I would still keep Brandon Powell on just because I feel like the special teams aspect is still valuable. I know they've been throwing Thayer Thomas out there. I think they threw Deshaun Jones out there to kind of see how that was working out. But Brandon Powell really hasn't been that great of a punt return either. I felt like he was kind of bottom of the barrel from what I think he was like bottom of the barrel punt return yards wise. I think it's a good problem to have for sure. Like, we went from KJ, who was kind of the sure fit wide receiver 3, and now you kind of have a camp battle going into week 1. But I would say Jalen Naylor's got to be the wide receiver 3 just because of the different aspect he can bring to the offense.
Sure. Tyler, I'm sure you probably agree with that too.
I think it's going to be a little bit more by committee approach. I do think Naylor's going to get the lion's share of it, but they love Brandon Powell and what he was able to do last year. He's got a really nice rapport with Kevin O'Connell from their time in Los Angeles. But the problem with Powell is he's a small boy, and I don't think he's going to be the guy that you want to have in there in every situation. But I do think there's a really nice role for him on this team. Plus, I can't trust Naylor to stay healthy because he has never proven to me that he can. Yeah, he's gone through training camp. Awesome. Show me more. You got to show me more if I'm going to put faith in you and trust you to be that guy. That's not to say he can't be that guy. That's not to say he won't. He hasn't. And I think that's a very important distinction that we have here. He has not yet. And I want to see it. I want to see him do it consistently. But the play on the field has been exceptional. Like 1998 Jake Reed-esque kind of stuff once Moss really took over. And obviously Reed got injured at the end of that year. But you feel really comfortable about putting this guy in a lot of different situations. You feel comfortable with him running those dig routes over the middle. You feel comfortable with him running fade stops. You feel comfortable with him running a full route tree and being a capable player. Can he be consistent? I don't know, but I like what I'm seeing. I just think Powell, even though he hasn't necessarily had a flashy camp, he's been good every time I've seen him. Just solid. Yeah. And he came in to camp with the job, so he had to be unseated. And I don't think he's been completely unseated because he has been solid throughout his career, throughout his time with the Vikings. And if you continue to do that, that's a good thing. And now you're looking at a situation where, hey, it's 3rd and 2. I'm going to have Powell as my wide receiver 3 because I'm going to have him run a whip route real quick, get open, get me 5 yards and a first down. Sounds great. And then, it's 3rd and 8. I want Naylor to run a dig route on Dagger. He's going to be more proficient at that than a guy like Powell. So I'm going to have him in there. And now you don't just have to worry about who's playing. You can be creative with how you're utilizing your personnel. And I think that approach is likely what the Minnesota Vikings will do with these guys.
Yeah. And I think Naylor's probably a better outside guy than Powell ever was too.
Yes.
We saw that, I think, in Cleveland as well, a catch or two on the outside as well. So yeah, I think Naylor will be that wide receiver 3 solidified. So I've been a big Naylor guy, ever since he was drafted. He just has to stay healthy, show us why he's good, why he should stay on the roster, why he should be that wide receiver 3. And, probably wide receiver 2 going into that Giants game, because I don't know if we'll have Jordan Addison or not. So with that ankle injury. So other than that, I think Naylor is probably, seated at that wide receiver 3 position. So yeah, that's all that we have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching and or listening to this episode. Thank you, Tyler, for hopping on with us. It was great talking some X's and O's football with you and some great topics as well. We'll have to get you on here another time as well, maybe during the season sometime as well. So
sounds good.
We'll go from there. So yeah, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at 612Vikings, and then Apple Podcasts and Spotify 612 Vikings, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Skol Vikes.